Hey, what's up? Hope you are doing well. I'm neonmushroom and welcome to the stack. Today we've got some content for you that I'm actually pretty pumped for. I've been teasing it at the end of the last couple videos, so if you watched this to the end, you already know what's up. If you don't, it's not a big deal. I'm about to explain it. Right now, we're going to be playing some Commander with 4 of the new uncommon commanders from Kaldheim. And each of these decks is going to have a budget restriction of $100. This does not include the price of the commanders or the basic lands. However, it's worth noting that even if you do include these prices, all the prices come out to about $100. A lot of these decks are using snow basics, so sometimes it's like 102, 105, but that's not a really big deal, especially since the snow basics has come down quite a bit as they were just reprinted in Kaldheim, so that's pretty cool. That's everything you should actually need to know, so let's go ahead and take a look at who's playing, what decks they've decided to build, what opening hands they've decided to keep, in addition to some normal upkeep stuff.
As always, if you like this show or any of our other shows on YouTube, liking, sharing, and subscribing helps us out immensely. If you like our content and don't mind that extra mile, you can always support us over on Patreon, over at patreon.com/mtg the stack. Comment down below any of your thoughts and feelings, and we hope you enjoy the show.
Alright, first up we have Guy Scott playing Narfi, Betrayer King. This is going to be a combo deck that wants to use Narfi in conjunction with something like Ashnod's Altar that's been turned into a snow permanent by Thermal Flux in order to go infinite with some type of an aristocrat effect like Zulaport Cutthroat. Guy will be keeping a 7-card hand including Dimmer Houseguard, Thermal Flux, Star Compass, Charcoal Diamond, Darkwater Catacombs, a snow-covered swamp, and a snow-covered island. Next up we have Ajdin piloting Aegar, the Freezing Flame. This deck's going to want to use its commander's static ability to draw as many cards as possible in hopes of putting together some type of a combo using Rail Zarek and 2 copy spells in order to go infinite off of Rail's static ability. Ajdin had to mulligan down to 6 cards. He's keeping a Lightning Greaves, 3 snow-covered mountains, a Valje Ford, I have no clue how to pronounce this card's name, a Torbrain, Thane of Redfell, and he has to bottom a copy of Jaya's Immolating Inferno. Next up we have Calvin playing Fynn the Fangbearer. This is going to be the most linear deck in the pod. This deck really wants to just use Finn's ability to put everyone at 10 poison counters as quickly as possible. This means the deck was built with as many Death Touch creatures as it could possibly fit in, given the budget constraint. Calvin's lucky enough to be keeping a 7-card hand with a Gnarlwood Dryad, an Elvish Mystic, a Skullwinder, an Arbor Elf, and 3 basic forests. Last up we have me, and I'll be playing Vega the Watcher. I want to start my early game by using Vega to farm as many cards as possible, using cards from throughout Magic's history that have abilities like Flashback, Jumpstart, and Rebound. Then I either want to lock my opponents out of the game in the late game using a combination of Knowledge Pool and something like a Drannith Magistrate, or I just want to straight up combo kill them using a Felidar Guardian in conjunction with a Clone and an Altar of the Brood. I'll be keeping a 7-card hand including Time Wipe, Elspeth Sun's Nemesis, a new card, Behold the Multiverse, Pognify, Thought Vessel, a Snow-Covered Plains, and a Snow-Covered Island. 1, 2, 3! Alright, Guy won card game, so we're going to start with him. Ajdin will bottom his card, Guy's going to play a Snow-Covered Swamp, and we'll pass the turn to Ajdin. He'll draw his card for turn, play that Ford tapped, and then Calvin's going to draw his card for turn and play a basic forest. He's going to tap it for a Gnarlwood Dryad and pass the turn to me. I'll draw, play a Snow-Covered Island, and just pass back to Guy, where he's going to draw and play a Snow-Covered Island, tapping for 2 to play a Star Compass. Then we'll head over to Ajdin's turn, where he's going to draw and play a Snow-Covered Mountain, then he'll tap out for a Lightning Greaves. With nothing else, he's going to pass the turn to Calvin, and he'll play another basic forest, and then drop his commander Fynn the Fangbearer. He'll attack me, but before damage, I'll Pognify his commander, so I only end up taking 1 Death Touch and 0 poison. He gets a 3/3, and then he passes to me. I'll draw and play a Snow-Covered Plains, and then I'm also going to tap out and play a Thought Vessel. With nothing else, I'll pass the turn to Guy. Going into the third cycle of turns, Guy's going to play a Snow-Covered Island, tap for 2 to play an Arcane Signet, and then I'll tap for 2 more and play a Charcoal Diamond. After that, Ajdin's going to draw his card, play another Snow-Covered Mountain, and play his commander, Aegar the Freezing Flame. He'll then equip it with the Lightning Greaves and head into combat. He's going to turn his commander sideways at me. I have no blocker, so I have to take 3 commander damage. Then Calvin is going to move into his first main phase and play a basic forest. At that point, he'll turn his team sideways at Guy, and he'll have to take all the damage, dropping down to 36. Then Calvin's going to tap for 3 and play Hornet Nest, and pass the turn to me. I'm going to play a basic snow-covered island as my land for turn, and then I'm going to tap for 2 mana and I'm going to foretell a card face down. After that, I'm going to tap the rest of my mana for blue and white, and I'm going to suspend Ith High Arcanist. It's going to be exiled with 4 suspend counters, and we'll move to Guy's turn. He'll play a snow-covered swamp as his land for turn, then he's going to tap for 4 mana and cast Jace, Architect of Thought. He'll immediately -2 the Jace, revealing the top 3 cards of his library. He'll pass them to Ajdin, who will split them as land in one pile, and Underworld Connections in the other. Guy's obviously going to take the Connections into his hand and bottom the other 2 cards. Then he's going to tap for 3 and play that Underworld Connections, and he's going to attach it to one of his snow-covered swamps and pass to Ajdin. He'll untap, and then he's going to drop another snow-covered mountain as his land for turn. He'll then tap out for 3 red and a colorless to play Torbrain, Thane of Redfell. He's going to move the Greaves over to the Torbrain and swing at Guy with the Torbrain and the Jace with his own commander. The commander deals excess damage, so Ajdin will draw a card. Guy will drop to 32. Before he passes the turn, he'll move the Greaves over, and we'll go to Calvin's turn. He'll play another Forest as his land for turn, then he's going to tap out to cast Fynn again out of the command zone for the 2nd time. He's going to head into combat, and he's going to turn 2 of his creatures sideways at me, and I have no blocks, so I do end up taking 4 damage and 2 poison. Then he passes his turn to me, I'll remove a suspend counter, then I'll tap for 2, and I'm actually going to foretell Behold the Multiverse. I scry 2, I leave them both on top and draw both of them, then I'll play Exotic Orchard as my land for turn, and I will tap for 2 more mana, and I'm going to cast Marbled Diamond. It comes into play tapped, and I will pass the turn to Guy. Kicking off the 5th cycle of turns, Guy will play a snow-covered swamp, and then I'll tap the swamp with the Underworld Connections on it to draw a card and lose a life. After that point, he'll tap for 3 and transmute his Dimmer House Guard. He's going to search his library for a Yahini's Expertise and add it to his hand. But he's going to straight away tap for 4 mana and cast Yahini's Expertise, and that has an ability that lets him drop a 3-drop or less, so we'll play Genesis Chamber, and it's going to functionally clear all of the board except for the Torbrain. After that, we'll go to Ajdin's turn, where we'll play a snow-covered island as his land for turn, and then tap out for 5 to cast his commander for the 2nd time. Then, he'll equip it with the Greaves, and he's going to go into combat and attack Guy with everything, dropping him down to 22. We'll move to Calvin's turn, where he'll play another basic forest as his land for turn, then he'll drop Skullwinder. Skullwinder has an ETB that works a lot like Eternal Witness. You get to buy something back from your graveyard, except for it also makes you choose an opponent to do the same. He chooses Ajdin as he has nothing in his graveyard, and then he buys back his Hornet Nest. He's going to tap for 2 and play Rampant Growth. He's going to go search his library for you guessed it, another basic forest. And with nothing else, he's going to pass the turn right back to me. I'll untap and then remove a suspend counter, then Guy's going to remember that his Genesis Chamber actually triggers whenever anyone plays a creature, so everyone's going to make their 1/1s that they should have had. Then I'll tap for 3 and cast my commander, Vega the Watcher. That'll trigger the Genesis Chamber and I'll make a 1/1. After that point, I'll just pass the turn right back to Guy. Guy's going to open up his turn with the Darkwater Catacombs, then he's going to activate that Underworld Connections one more time, and he's going to draw a card and lose a life. After this point, he's going to tap for some mana, and he's going to cast Wishclaw Talisman. It comes into play with 3 counters, and he's immediately going to tap 1 and remove one of the counters to tutor a card from his library, and I'll give Calvin control of the Talisman. He's going to tutor for a new card, Blood on the Snow, then he'll cast his commander, Narfi, Betrayer King, and trigger Genesis Chamber. After that, he'll pass the turn to Ajdin, where he'll untap and draw his card for turn, and play a Snow-Covered Mountain as his land for turn. Then he's going to tap for 6 and overload Mizzium Mortars. I do have a response. I'll tap for 1 white, and I'm going to play Emerge Unscathed on my commander, giving it protection from red. This card does have Rebound. Then the board's going to be wiped. They all get dealt excess damage, so Ajdin's going to draw 5 cards. Then I'll head into combat, and I'll swing out at Guy for a grand total of 10 damage, bringing him down to 11. He'll go to discard, and we'll pass the turn right back to Calvin. He'll draw his card for turn, and play a basic forest as his land for turn. Then he's going to tap for 3 and cast Hornet Nest. After that, he'll tap for 1 and play an Arbor Elf, and then he'll tap for another 1 to play an Elvish Mystic. We temporarily forget about all of the Genesis Chamber triggers, but don't worry, we do end up remembering them. Calvin's going to activate the Wishclaw Talisman, passing it to Ajdin and searching his library for a Bow of Nelia. After that, he'll try to pass the turn, but I'll cast Glimpse of Freedom, drawing a card. Then I'm going to untap and rebound the Emerge Unscathed. That's going to trigger Vega. I'm going to give it Pro Red and draw an extra card because it wasn't cast from my hand. I'll draw for turn, then I will play a Snow-Covered Plains and remember to remove a suspend counter. After that, I'll head into combat and attack Guy with my Vega. He can't block, so he drops to 9, taking 2 commander damage. Then I'll tap for 4 and play Elspeth, Sun's Nemesis. I'll immediately use the Elspeth to generate 2 1/1 tokens. Calvin actually remembers his Genesis Chamber tokens. And then with nothing else, I'll pass the turn to Guy. Guy's gonna untap, draw his card for turn, and play a snow-covered island as his land for turn. Then he'll tap for 6 and cast Blood on the Snow. I do have a response. I want to tap for 2 mana, and I'll cast the failure side of Failure to Comply. He wants to respond by tapping 3 to cast Perplex, which would counter it if I didn't want to discard my hand. However, I do want to discard my hand, so the Perplex does not work. The failure puts the Blood in the Snow back in Guy's hand, and then he passes the turn to Ajdin. Ajdin will untap, play a snow-covered island, and then he's just going to head right into combat, and he's going to Alpha Strike Guy. Before he does, Guy's going to draw a card off of Underworld Connections, and then he actually takes the Wishclaw Talisman back because Ajdin opted not to use it. Then Ajdin's going to play Double Vision, and with nothing else, he'll pass the turn to Calvin. Calvin will draw his card for turn, then he's going to tap for 3 mana, and he's going to cast Bow of Nelia. After that, Ajdin's shields are down, so Calvin's going to cast Triumph of the Hordes, go into combat, and he's going to kill Ajdin with Infect. He goes to 10 poison, and with nothing else, Calvin's going to pass the turn to me, where I'll untap and remove the last suspend counter off of my Ith. When this enters play, Vega sees it come into play, not being cast from my hand, so I'll draw an extra card. Then I'll use Elspeth to make 2 more tokens. I'll head into combat and attack Calvin for 2 commander damage, and then move into my second main phase, where I'll tap for 1 white, and I'll cast Comply out of my graveyard, which triggers Vega. I'm going to say that Calvin cannot cast Fynn the Fangbearer until my next turn. After that, I'll pass the turn to Calvin, where he's going to untap and draw his card for turn, and play another basic forest.
Do you have any instant speed effects in your graveyard?
I do. I'll list them to you. I have Ona's Grace, Glimpse of Freedom, and that's it. They are draw spells.
They're draw spells.
Correct. Okay. After asking about my graveyard, Calvin's going to tap for 2 and use Bow of Nelia to try to shoot down my commander. I have a response. I'm going to tap for 2 and play Center Soul to give it Pro Green. This also has Rebound. Then Calvin's going to tap for 4 mana and play Kessig Recluse, a 2/3 spider with both Reach and Death Touch. With nothing else, he'll try to pass to me, but I'm actually going to tap for 3 mana, and I'm going to retrace Ona's Grace, discarding a command tower. That'll trigger my Vega, so I'll draw 2 cards. Then we're going to move to my turn, where I'll untap, and then retrace my Center Soul. That's going to give Vega Pro Green. I'll draw an extra card, then I'll draw my card for turn. I'm going to head into combat and hit Calvin for 2. He can't block it with his Reach creature because I have Pro Green. Then in my second main phase, I'm going to tap for 5 mana to play Cataclysmic Gearhulk. When it enters the battlefield, it has a trigger. Him and I are each going to decide to keep 1 artifact, creature, enchantment, and planeswalker and sacrifice the rest. I'll choose to keep the Gearhulk as my artifact and my commander as my creature. Obviously I'll be keeping Elspeth as well. Then Calvin will keep a 1/1, the Hornet's Nest, and the Bow. Then I'm going to minus my Elspeth at the wrong time. I have no clue why I did this. And then I'll pass the turn back to Calvin, where I'll untap, draw, and then he's going to tap for 4 and he'll play Harmonize. This will let him draw 3 cards. Then he's going to tap for 3 more mana, and he's going to play Evolution Sage. So when he plays this basic forest as his land for turn, which will proliferate me to 3 poison counters. Then he's going to tap for 2 mana to try to shoot down my commander with the Bow. I have a response. I'm going to tap for 2 mana, and I'm going to escape Glimpse of Freedom. Vega will see me do that, so I'll draw a card off Vega and a card off of Glimpse of Freedom. After that point, Calvin is going to shoot down my commander. This does work. He'll pass the turn to me. I'll untap and play a snow-covered island as my land for turn, and then I'll head into combat and attack Calvin with my Gearhulk. He takes it, dropping to 32. Then I'll tap for 2 mana, and I'm going to cast Drannith Magistrate. The green deck doesn't have any responses to my 2 mana creature, so I'll tap for 2 more, and I'm going to foretell another card face down. After that, I'll pass the turn to Calvin. He's going to untap and play a forest. This will proliferate again. I'll go to 4 poison counters. Then I'll head into combat and hit me with the 1/1 token. I'm not interested in blocking when there's a bow in play, so I'll take it and go to 31. At unstep, I'm going to cast Think Twice and draw a card. After that, I'll untap and I'll draw my card for turn. I'll play a Snow-Covered Plains as my land for turn. I'll attack with the Gearhulk, and he decides he wants to trade it for the spider, so that trade's good. I'll try to pass, but before I can, Calvin's going to use the bow to gain 3 life. Then I'll untap and try to draw his card, but before he ends his upkeep, I'm going to Rapid Hybridization, the Evolution Sage, so he can't keep proliferating me. Then he'll draw and head into combat, and he'll attack me for what should have been 1 damage, but we somehow confused it to be a 3/3, so I go down to 28. Then I'll play a basic forest in a second main phase and try to pass the turn, but on his end step, I'll flashback Think Twice and draw a card. Then I'm going to escape Glimpse of Freedom, exiling 5 cards from my graveyard to draw another card. After all that's done with, we'll move to my next turn, where I'll untap, draw, and play a Snow-Covered Plains as my land for turn. I'll try to pass the turn, but before I can, Calvin's going to put a 1-1 counter on his 1-1, but now we think it's a 4-4. So when he heads into combat, I am going to flash into Fury Mage's Zephyr, but I'm not going to block, so I'm going to end up taking a grand total of 7. Mind you, this should have only been 5 damage. He'll tap for 2 and play Death Hood Cobra, and with nothing else, he'll pass the turn to me. I'll draw my card and play a Snow-Covered Island. Then, I'm going to count out and tap for 6 mana and overload Winds of Abandon. This functionally works like a super Path to Exile. Calvin has a response. He wants to tap his Bow of Nelia to put 4 cards from his graveyard on the bottom of his library. However, since he's searching his library for 3 basic forests, he actually gets to shuffle them in, so that's actually a decent amount of added value. After that, I'm going to head into combat and attack Calvin with both of my creatures. This is going to drop into 31. I'll tap for 3 to cast Treasure Mage, which triggers when it enters the battlefield, and I'll search my library for a Knowledge Pool, a key combo piece in this deck. I'll add that to my hand, and then I'll pass the turn to Calvin. He'll draw his card for turn, he'll tap for 1 green, and I'll play a Moss Viper. After that, he's going to pass the turn to me, where I'll untap, and then I'm going to play my Knowledge Pool. When this enters the battlefield, we'll each exile the top 3 cards of our libraries. Now we're at a point in the game where I'm actually going to fast forward through the rest of the game and just kind of explain what's going to happen here for anyone who's not in the know about this combo. I have 2 cards in play that are very important, Knowledge Pool and Drannith Magistrate. Drannith Magistrate is saying that players other than me can't cast cards that aren't in their hand. This includes commanders, which is why Calvin hasn't played as Fynn for most of the game. I have this card Knowledge Pool that says whenever you cast a card, instead you exile it and cast a card for free that you exiled with Knowledge Pool. This is going to create a loop where every time Calvin tries to play a spell, he exiles it to the Knowledge Pool. He cannot cast a spell from exile because Drannith Magistrate will not let him. This means that he cannot advance his board state anymore, so for the rest of the game, I'm going to be able to keep playing permanents, cycling spells that I've exiled with my Knowledge Pool, and I'm going to beat him down for the course of the next 8 turns, I think, making me the winner of this game.
Oh yeah, we got there. Here at the end, I want to talk about how the game went from the least impactful deck to the most impactful deck, kind of just reviewing how each deck performed. And here in this case, I'll take a little bit longer as we're working with commanders that you probably haven't seen have any gameplay before. So like I said, we'll talk from the least impactful to the most impactful, which is kind of strange considering everyone's deck kind of did what they designed it to do for the most part. 3 out of the 4 of these decks were combo decks, and the linear deck was even a super high synergy deck. So all these decks, it may have been a little difficult to see how well they were performing based on their game plan that they were designed to have, so I'll try to explain that the best I can here. We'll start with Guy. He was playing Narfi, and I would say that he died early because his game plan was going better than any of ours early on in terms of executing his combo. By turn 4, he had generated 8 mana sources, which is a lot when you're considering that you're outside of green and you're in a pod with all decks that have a budget of $100. That means his blue-black deck wrapping to 8 mana is very difficult for us to deal with as the game progresses, because really good answers, things like that, they cost more money to take us out of budget range. So we had to knock him out very quickly. That's why he died so soon. But he was able to generate all those mana sources. He was able to get down his, what was the name of that card? The Genesis Chamber, the thing that makes a 1/1 every time a creature enters anyone's side of the battlefield. We actually forgot that clause in the game, you may have noticed. But that's actually one of his combo pieces. So what I want to do here is explain how the combo works for anyone who doesn't know. This is not my idea. We actually picked it up off of a Commander's Quarters video. Mitch did a really good job in that video. If I can, I'll leave a link in the description for you guys. I thought it was really well put together. How you want to do this is you need Narfi. Narfi says you can play him from your graveyard if you can pay 3 snow mana. This seems a little bit difficult to achieve if you want to do an infinite combo, and it kind of is, but there's a really interesting way to do it. There's a card called Thermal Flux, and if you use your Thermal Flux on an Ashnod's Altar, it's going to start to generate snow mana because it's now a snow permanent. This doesn't work the way we want it to because you sacrifice Narfi to your Ashnod's Altar, you make 2 snow, now you have to pay an extra to play the Narfi out, and you can only do this as many times as you have untapped snow mana. But there's a few cards in this deck, and Genesis Chamber is one of them, where it causes it to go infinite pretty quickly. In this case, he had his Genesis Chamber, so he could have played his Narfi, and then he actually had the Thermal Flux in his hand. It was in his opener, you guys probably saw that. And there's a lot of ways for him to actually get the Ashnod's Altar. Transmute is one of the main keyword abilities in that deck. So because, you know, tutors are expensive, so you have to find a way to search for your combo. And if you're in blue and black, Transmute's an awesome way to do it. He actually used the Perplex, but he could have used it to go get the Ashnod's Altar if he wasn't under so much pressure. What you want to do is make your Ashnod's Altar a snow permanent with a thermal flux. Then you have a Genesis Chamber. There's a few cards that do this. In this case, we'll use Genesis Chamber as the example because it was in play. You sacrifice your Narfi to your Ashnod's Altar, which is a snow permanent, and you make 2 snow mana. And then you need to pay an additional mana to make a 3rd snow mana to play it out of the graveyard. But then your Genesis Chamber sees this and it drops a 1/1. Now you can sacrifice the Narfi and the 1/1 both to the Ashnod's Altar to generate 4 snow mana, and you can keep doing this and you get infinite ETBs and deaths. If you have a card like, for instance, Zulaport Cutthroat, you just win the game outright. And we were all pretty fearful that guy was moving towards the combo very quickly because of how much mana he generated. So we got knocked out really early. It's a control deck. It tried to control the game really hard. The game went really fast, which brings us to our next player, Ajdin. His deck, and I'll explain this really quickly. I think I did an okay job doing it, of explaining it at the beginning, but for anyone who didn't catch it, you got Rail Zarek. In this case, I think it's Rail Storm Conduit. Has a static ability that says whenever you cast or copy a spell, it deals a damage to each of your opponents. So if you have 2 copy spells, let's say for this example, you've got a Reverberate and a Twin Cast, and then any other spell on the stack that you can copy, for this sake, we'll use Lightning Bolt. So they're all self-contained spells from Ajdin's deck. If you cast Lightning Bolt, and then you hold priority and leave it on the stack, and copy it with Reverberate, while holding priority and use Twin Cast to copy Reverberate, and use the copy of Reverberate to copy the initial Twin Cast, you've gone infinite. You now are dealing infinite damage. Before that Lightning Bolt even resolves, you can set up like 1 billion spells on the stack, spells and copies, and Rail Zarek will see all that and it's going to kill everyone. That's the deck's main combo game plan, but the reason I really like Aegar the Freezing Flame is because when it's not doing that, it's farming a ton of cards with Aegar, and it's using Aegar in conjunction with a bunch of other giants and powerful just bodies in general to kind of go on a beatdown plan. And we saw that happen to Guy. He was able to get the Lightning Greaves, put him on the Aegar, put him on the Torbrain. Even when his Aegar died, he just recast it. He almost did all the damage to Guy. I think between Calvin and I, we dealt like maybe 8 damage to him. Ajdin did the rest of that work. It was actually really impressive, but it made him a threat, which is why when he passed the turn to Calvin right after killing Guy, Calvin just played Triumph of the Hordes and swung out at Ajdin and put 10 poison on him, putting him out of the game. Really quick, Calvin's game plan was executed really, really well. I think this is something I want to explore a little bit outside of the budget constraint of $100. Fynn's really interesting because one thing I noticed is he just played a 1-drop Death Touch 10-cent creature and then followed it with Fynn, and if I didn't have the Pognify, he would have immediately put me on 2 poison, and that's really powerful. There aren't a lot of decks that are just putting 2 poison on someone on turn 2, and then it stacks really well because as you get creatures with Death Touch, which by the way are super hard to block, you just start to put a ton of poison counters on people. It's a super linear deck, not a whole lot to talk about. He just executed his game plan really well. Unfortunately, he took out Ajdin because Ajdin didn't use the Wishclaw Talisman, and he had a super aggressive board state, so like we were both in danger, and he had the shotgun, so he had to take out Ajdin with it. I had no cards in hand, but I was able to keep going through the game drawing a ton of cards because I'm playing Vega, which says whenever I cast a spell, if it wasn't from my hand, I draw a card. I've got a lot of cards that I can cast not from my hand that say draw a card, meaning I'm just constantly casting Divination over and over for way less mana than you should be paying for a Divination. And because of that, I was able to outlast Calvin's game plan. And then I put him in the lock. I was able to wipe his board a few times. I had Teferi, and then I put him in the Drannith Magistrate Genesis Chamber lock, which I did explain at the end of the video, so I won't go too in depth with it here. But I really like that lock. I know some people might think that's a little bit drab. It's like a boring way to win a game, which is why I fast forwarded through the last 12 turns of play, why I actually manually beat him down. But there's another way to win in this deck actually, which is Felidar Guardian, Clone, and Altar of the Brood. You know, you have your clone enter as a Felidar Guardian, which flickers the Felidar Guardian, and then you go infinite there. And then your Altar of the Brood sees that and goes, everyone needs to exile or mill their libraries, and that's a way to win. But I got the game. That's how I did it. I thought it was really fun. We're going to be doing more budget games like this, not always necessarily tied to a set release. We actually all kind of like building on a budget, so you might see some new stuff coming out from us just on budget decks in general. Maybe we'll play around with the price threshold. For $100 felt perfect for this one. We might play with something a little lower, something a little higher. Let us know what you guys want to see in the comments, because I am genuinely a little bit lost as to what the correct price point is. I like 100. We're all in franchise Magic players, so building on a budget is kind of like just a deck building exercise. Most of our decks are like north of $1,000 at this point. But that gets kind of boring because you select the same cards all the time for your decks. Yeah, I'm gonna put Mana Crypt in my deck. It's a good card. This stops you from following that play pattern, which I think is really neat. if you made it this far into the video, I'll let you guys know another little sweet thing we're working on. If you remember the Commander Legends game that we released, we kind of did that whole big produced thing. It was a little bit memey, it was a little bit weird and cringy, and also I think a little bit cool, hopefully moderately funny, where we did like these confessionals and interviews, and it was a little bit more produced. We've got something like that planned for Kaldheim. We're doing a little bit more Kaldheim content now than we did for Commander Legends, just because we're pumped about the Commanders, and now I've become a slightly better video editor, and so has Calvin, so we're going to be able to make more content around this set, which I'm really excited for. So plan to see another budget game from Kaldheim Commanders, not these same ones we just played, and plan to see a non-budget game with maybe a little bit more production value. I think that could be really cool. Hopefully it's cool because we're already in the process of creating the videos. So there you go. I've rambled on long enough. That's all I have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, we'll see you next time.